Right next door to the old Bennington County Courthouse in Manchester Village, in the green space between that building and the First Congregational Church, stand a handful of trees. Nothing remarkable, you might think. But one of them, a London plane tree, has an unusual story to tell. For starters, at 67 feet in height, it's the biggest tree of its kind in the entire state. But even more interesting is its origins from seeds that came to Manchester from Ellis Island, the immigration center located in New York City. It was planted in 1987, as is shown in this photo published in the Manchester Journal by members of the Bartlett Tree Company and village trustee Paul Wheeler. Apparently there are more than one, but this one is the lone survivor. We'll let Manchester Historical Society curator Sean Harrington, Alan Colfie, a professional forester, and Jim White, a retired Bennington County forester, take it from there.
So, a great story to tell, a little piece of Manchester history. As I was going through the journal archives, which Andrew, the cameraman here behind us, so dutifully saved a number of years ago, I came across this photo, which showed a number of people here in the village planting what they call the London plane tree. The seedling was from Ellis Island, Liberty Island down in New York. So I couldn't even see the seedling they were planting in here. I mean, it was just a nub. So I said, I wonder if it survived. I've never heard of this. So I came up to the village and kind of directionally looked and said, could this be it? 35 years, the tree got this big? So before I got all excited and posted about it, I decided, well, I better ask somebody who actually knows a little more about trees than me, other than they're outside and have leaves. So I shot a message off to Alan, and he was kind enough to come down. Actually, the next day, I think he came down just to confirm.
Well, I was pretty intrigued with the story and the picture and the pictures that Sean had taken of the tree. So I came down to look at it, and same thing, lined it up, and you can actually see this big forked maple tree, which has got a knothole in it, and used to be the Orgus building.
The Orgus Inn.
And so it's like, seemed to me pretty indisputable in terms of its placement or whatever. And 1987, when they planted it, was just about when I got started in forestry. And I had a good friend and mentor that I've known over the years, and Jim White, the county forester. So I sent the pictures to him, thinking, oh, well, I'm sure, it's a tree in Manchester Village. Jim White was involved. And he was skeptical that this tree, planted as a tiny little seedling in 1987, could now be 19.3 inches in diameter, which should work out the math exactly, but it's around almost 2.5 inches of diameter growth a year.
Versus, the first 10 years, there was nothing there.
Right.
We went through a stick and a whole handle stuff. And eventually it grew faster than that to make that work.
Right.
Which is unbelievable.
So it's a common problem in forestry, actually. Like, well, how do you determine how old a tree is? We won't get into it, but big trees aren't always old trees, and little trees aren't always small trees, because it depends on how much sun they've been exposed to and how much competition and whatnot. So the way foresters solve that problem is with a device invented in Sweden called a increment borer. And this allows you to core into the tree and extract a very small core that then you can actually count the rings and verify the age of the tree. And so Jim was like, we have to core the tree. So we all met here, along with Alan, the road commissioner of Manchester Village, who it turns out was there on that day when this tree was planted. And he said it, just puttered along for a while, and then finally he put a fence around it. That was part of, I think, all of our misbelief, is that this tiny seedling could have survived lawnmowers and dog walkers and snow, weed whackers. And no, he was like, no,
This is it.
This is it. It was right here. After a few years, they put a fence around it, and then it, took off. So we decided not to actually core the tree because it does make a tiny hole through the cambium, and
But it's like tapping a tree for sugar. It doesn't hurt the tree if you do it right.
no. But we had several points of verification. So there it is. And then as we all dug into it a little bit, it's kind of cool. The London plane tree is a cross, a hybrid between the American sycamore, which grows around here, and the Oriental plane tree. And it was developed in, they don't really know where the source of the tree came from, but in the mid-1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, when there was an incredible amount of coal use, there was really heavy soot and pollution in cities, and it killed all the street trees. But they found out that this tree is highly resistant to both the soot deposition and the pollution itself. So now you'll find them planted everywhere, and we're just making this up, but probably why Bartlett was doing research into these plane trees to use as replacements for elm trees or other trees that have died over the years.
To me, the fact that we had a seedling from Ellis Island, and he said it was just, a little nub, and he said that thing's not going to make it. It was, once he kind of said, of course, he mowed and took care and just made sure it didn't get hit. He said that the first 5 years, he said it was just a stick that grew up, and he said all of a sudden it just started moving. So we didn't have to core it. And then these two gentlemen pulled out their equipment and started shooting how large it actually was by tapes, and they were over by the Congregational Church, and which led to it being listed on the state.
This is the Vermont state record London plane tree. You measure the diameter of the crown, the circumference of the stem, and the height of the tree, and there's a formula that then comes up with a number. And
the previous record, the tree, London plane.
And when I called the lady at Extension, by some coincidence that we don't know anything about,
We all have alibis.
the previous record had recently died, and so this is now the Vermont state record London plane tree.
Can I quote a previous famous person, John Page, a former county agent for 100 years? John said, "You always plant a tree for somebody else." Well, the guy that planted this, Alan, he planted it for himself because he saw it develop into a real tree. I mean,
Right.
That's how super fast these guys go.
Yeah.
And that's great today because I'm looking right behind Alan right here, and I'm seeing 2 ash trees,
Right.
and they're doomed.
Yeah.
So we need something to replace the ash trees. And they grew fast, but nothing like this.
Right.
It's because of the emerald ash borers.
Yes.
So how quickly will some of those ash trees?
They, from point of infection, it's 10 years. 90% of them are dead. And it's a moving, it's moving all the time. The little bug that carries the disease is moving all the time. With our help, a lot. But
I'm just wondering, Sean, is there any significance to the fact that the seed came from Ellis Island and all of that, or is that just a coincidence that the Bartlett Tree Company got it from there, and no special connection?
Well, that was that was kind of the mystery, the fact that that the article said treed seedlings from Ellis Island and Liberty Island, New York City, were planted next to the Manchester Village Courthouse. And village trustee Paul Wheeler, who was the trustee for years and years,
Yeah.
unfortunately we can't ask him that.
Right.
Why?
Right.
And we haven't had when we had Joe Blair. We brought Joe Blair into the conversation.
Yeah.
To ask him, because he was when he came here, he came to work at Bartlett right around the same time.
Right.
And even Alan couldn't remember why. He just was here. They were going to plant a tree, so he was here to kind of see it happen. And we went through and identified most of the people in the photograph of who they were, but nobody seems to know how it came to be that it was here.
So therefore, anyone watching this program then has a mystery to solve, right? They can go out and try and figure out what's the connection between Ellis Island and The seedling.
Other than the seedling was there. And probably once this airs and somebody watches it, they're going to be, oh, the story is boom, 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 boom.
Right.
And there we go.
There we go. And so this is also a little bit of a fishing expedition to see if it hits the right eyes and ears.
You have to go to Ellis Island and see if they have rows of beautiful London plane trees that perhaps were the progeny of this, or that this was the progeny.
And why that's on Ellis Island?
Right. Right.
And hopefully put up some kind of marker so people know this story, because 35 years later, the only person who knew what this tree was Alan. And when Alan decides to retire,
right,
and somebody comes in and says, "Why do we have this tree? Let's just cut it down."
You never know what may be hiding in plain sight. Maybe every tree, just like every picture, has a story to tell. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.